Hey guys, it's History Behind the Warrior, and welcome to another video. Now today, coming off the reveal of God of War Ragnarok at the PlayStation Showcase, I will be talking about the trailer they released, and dissecting it frame by frame, as we will be able to understand the contents of said trailer, and what exactly is going on here with Ragnarok. Now, with that said, please do keep in mind that this may end up being rather spoiler heavy, as I will be analysing everything in depth, ranging from the story to enemies to the gameplay itself. So please do keep that in mind going forward, as I don't wish to ruin your experience before the game does release. Also, before this video does actually get started, I highly do recommend you check out my most recent God of War video, as it covers a lot of details regarding the story and what to expect from the gameplay, which I will be discussing here. So these videos do actually kind of go hand in hand with each other. So again, please do give that a watch there before you jump into this one, as it will give you more context as to what's going on here. So with that said, let's begin. Now, the very start of the trailer is basically the time and tone setter for the rest of this game. As we do hear and learn, the start of this game takes place during Fimbulwinter, a period of time after Balder's death, to somewhat foreshadow the oncoming storm of Ragnarok. From here, we get our first look at Kratos and Atreus, with Kratos wearing very appropriate Viking battle armor. But let's actually look at Atreus here. As you can clearly tell from looking at him, it's been a few years since Balder's death, and Atreus is no longer a child, but a young man. What is also actually a very nice callback here in this scene alone is that Atreus is now successfully hunting deer, an important and key moment at the start of the first game, somewhat establishing the relationship, or lack of one, between father and son at the start of their journey. Shortly following the Santa Monica title card, we do get some important bits of exposition here, with Atreus elaborating on Fimbulwinter, and where exactly does he fit into the grand mold of Ragnarok. Understandably, after learning about his heritage being half frost giant and being half god, he wants answers about his background and what ultimately became of his mother's people. Now, whilst he does have his heart set on this, he is warned by Kratos that by actively going out and doing this may spark a bigger war amongst the gods. But despite Kratos' warning, it does seem like Atreus will ultimately be trying his best to avoid said conflict if it can be helped. Of course, possibly trying to avoid his fate and the parts he does play in Ragnarok as a whole. Now, as this exposition goes on, we get a number of different shots here showing what I believe to be Kratos and Atreus basically gearing up to leave their home and pursue Atreus' own quest. One of the shots here that did actually catch my attention is Atreus holding what I believe to be a rune in his hands. Now, I don't know how important or significant this is. I don't believe this is something from the first game, but I believe this could possibly be a MacGuffin of sorts that allows them to track down another character, someone who I will be talking about in a bit. Now, in also saying that I could be looking way too deep into this, but I did want to point out this item here, as it does look like it does have some importance to the story. Following this shot, whilst the pair are setting out on their sleigh, we do see them get attacked by Freya, who is no doubt following up on her promise from the previous game of dragging Kratos' carcass across the 9 realms. Now, judging from where this takes place, which actually does seem to be rather early on in the story, it does look like Freya will be a recurring villain and someone to battle throughout the game, possibly hunting you as you proceed on your journey. Also worth noting here that Freya's design has slightly changed. It actually looks like she has not stopped crying since Balder's death, as her makeup has been smeared across her face. Along with this, whilst it was foreshadowed in the first game that she would be returning back to her Valkyrie Queen roots, we don't see a lot of that in her design here. But if we encounter her more than once here, we may in fact see a change in her design. But that is 100% a tinfoil hat theory on my end. After this, we get some more shots of Atreus and Kratos coming to blows and the inside of their home, where we get our first shot of Mimir, who is writing a book with his mouth. Respect, my dude. Of course, this is at the start of their journey before they do head off. Sorry, Mimir.
I'm going to cut off your head now.
Now this is where the trailer gets very interesting. As we break away from the cutscenes, we do get to see more of the world of Midgard. More specifically, how exactly has Fimbulwinter affected it? And due to the harsh cold weather, the lake in the first game has now frozen over. So whilst we may have been told tales in the back of a boat, it seems like now it will be done on the back of a sleigh. After this, we get some very important exposition for the story, and that is that Atreus believes that the only way he can achieve his answers is by tracking down Asgard's own god of war, Tyr, a character believed by many to have been dead, but as we do see, he is far from that. Now, if you haven't played the first game, Tyr is a very important character in Asgard's pantheon. Whilst he is the god of war, Tyr believed in building bridges opposed to burning them down, something that the All-Father had his heart set on, and because of this, Odin made Tyr disappear. So for many centuries, no one knew about the whereabouts of Tyr, or ultimately his fate, as he defied his fellow gods, and ultimately tried his best to help the Frost Giants. Now, as we go back to the trailer, we can see that their journey takes them to a completely new realm, one that we've never seen before, and I believe that this realm is in fact Svartalfheim, the home of the dwarves. We get multiple shots of this realm here, and one of the most interesting aspects about it is that the realm feels alive. Unlike the first game, where the realms are kind of barren of life or are caught in a war, the realm of Svartalfheim seems to be at relative peace, and as we are exploring the realm, we are once again reintroduced to Brock and Sindri from the first game. We get to see what I believe is their workshop, and this is actually a pretty big thing, seeing as this could be the very same workshop that forged the likes of Faye's axe and Thor's Mjolnir. So this may possibly foreshadow a greater weapon that could be forged in this game. Our next shot here introduces us to our new character, Durlin. Now, not much is really known about Durlin, or how exactly is he interwoven into this story, but judging by his study room, it does seem like Durlin is a scholar of sorts, and he may be an important source of information as Kratos and Atreus do attempt to track down Tyr. But again, the information we do have here is simply coming off the trailer and what I can visually see of this character. Our next cut here in the trailer finally brings on some gameplay, and it looks like here we are at a crafting mill of sorts in what I believe is to be Svartalfheim. This is our first exposure to the enemies of this realm, and whilst I don't have a name for them right now, they are very interesting in terms of design, bearing traits of what seems to be like bears and bullfrogs. In fact, shortly after this introduction shot, we do see one of them spit a acid projectile at Kratos. One thing I do want to point out here as well is the large beast sitting in the middle seems to bear similar traits from the ogre in the 2018 game. So this may in fact be this realm's somewhat version of an ogre. Now, back on the topic of Kratos, a very interesting thing we do see here in terms of gameplay is actually now how he's utilizing the Blades of Chaos. With their advantage as ranged weapons, Kratos is now fully using them at every possible distance. In this segment here, we see him use it as basically a grappling hook, being able to close the distance between himself and his enemies, as he's able to literally yank himself up to vantage points and even enemies themselves. Now, our next attack that's quite interesting here is what seems to be an AoE attack from a high vantage point. One thing I want to point out is that a big thing the team wanted to do going forward was to expand on the already existing tools of the previous game, and that is clearly what we see here, as they are adding more verticality and options to the attacks you do have on deck. Also, whilst the trailer and gameplay may be focused around Kratos, we do see Atreus in the background here, so much like the previous installments, he still will be acting as an assist for Kratos, but I do not expect to have his toolkit be quite as large as the Ghost of Sparta's. To break up the gameplay, the trailer does cut back to a bit of exposition between the two, where it seems like Atreus wants Kratos to train him as a soldier. No doubt, something Kratos is extremely reluctant in doing, as his hands are heavy with the blood of his allies that have served under him. Now, once again, we do cut back to more gameplay, with what seems to be new human enemies. I can't quite say what realm this is taking place on, but judging from the architecture, I'm probably going to say this is Midgard. And it's here where Kratos puts on quite an impressive show, displaying some of his legacy moves from the previous game, as well as what I believe is a new move upon swinging the Blades of Chaos. As this goes on, we do have some foreboding dialogue being played above it. And as we all now do know, this is Thor, seemingly taunting Kratos and his new somewhat nature. Of course, at the end of this little sequence here, we do get a call back to the ending shot of the dream sequence Atreus had in 2018's God of War. Now here we cut right back into the action again, and I believe the enemy we see here is in fact our first Asgardian enemy type, as this individual is summoned in by what I believe is the Bifrost. Plus, unlike every other enemy type we've seen in this trailer, this enemy looks very different to the rest. So I do believe that this is the first time we are seeing an Asgardian warrior. Now, whilst it's very brief, during this fight, we see Kratos activating a buff on his weapon, we see Kratos utilizing the Leviathan axe, and a buff that amplifies his frost damage. After this, we get another action sequence where Kratos and Atreus are back on the bridge of Midgard, fighting Draugrs, and really here it's kind of an exhibition for the Leviathan axe, as we have been seeing the Blades of Chaos the entire time. As expected, like before, the Leviathan axe does share the same traits from the previous game, being able to call it back and utilize a built-in heavy slash that will allow you to execute your enemies. However, in this game, it does seem like the animation is a bit different. What's also worth pointing out here, as there are a lot of quick cuts, is that upon executing his enemy, just after performing said action, we do see that the short delay stances have in fact returned. So it does seem like they're giving you more options to play around with your toolkit by threading in and out of stances and using weapons how you see fit. Following this, we then cut to a very brief fight of Kratos battling a new enemy type, the Dreki. As of making this video, I'm not entirely sure what realm the Dreki is from, but from what we have seen of Vanaheim's wild exotic architecture, I believe this is where the Dreki does reside. And talking of new enemies, in our next shot here, we cut back to Midgard, and we are introduced to another new enemy, this time a centaur that has been dubbed as the Stalker. Now, we don't know if the centaurs here have any ties to Kratos' Greek origins, but we do know from the trailer here that they throw spears. Now, something I believed many might have in fact missed out on is that when we cut back to Alfheim, if you remember from the last game, the Light Elves and the Dark Elves were seemingly at war with each other. And whilst the Dark Elves did have the upper hand, when Kratos intervened, needing to acquire the Light of Alfheim, he did turn the tides in the war, releasing the Light Elves and allowing them to continue their war. What many might have missed in this very brief scene is that the two sides are still clashing against each other now, but whilst you did save the Light Elves, it seems like being caught in the fray of the battle will also make you an enemy for them, something we do see in the next shot here. We then cut back to the Stalker and then Svartalheim, where we see what I believe is a new runic attack used by Kratos, using a huge shield to slam the ground and stun enemies caught in his proximity. Now, our final climactic gameplay shot here is a battle sequence where Kratos and Atreus are fighting side by side against a group of Draugr and human enemies. During this fight sequence, we actually get to see Atreus utilize one of his new tools, and that is riding a deer into combat, whilst Kratos himself hacks and slashes his way through his opponents with a mix of old and new tools, which includes an ability to catch your enemy in one of the curves of the Leviathan axe and basically turn them into a projectile. Now, this is quickly followed by a finisher before we close out with another cinematic segment. Now, I must admit I was very surprised that they showed this off in the trailer. It is rather spoiler heavy, but in this very brief segment, we see that Kratos and Atreus are successful in finding the location of Tyr and freeing him from the shackles of Odin. And what this shot here really does prove is the difference between being 5'11" and 6 foot. Jesus Christ. After this, we get our final shot here, which introduces us to yet another character, Angrboda, who possibly breaks the fourth wall with her dialogue here by saying we will get answers soon, or soon enough, meaning that I believe another trailer is on the horizon very soon, as we are yet to know this game's official release date. Now with that said, this has been everything regarding God of War Ragnarok's trailer. From what you can tell, there's a lot going on here, and I did have to take a bit of extra time to make this video, as I wanted to make sure that upon releasing it, I got as much information as possible. Because yeah, there's lots of stuff going on with it narratively, as well as stuff going on gameplay wise, which I'm very excited to see, as the 2018 game had a fairly heavy emphasis with how you needed to keep your boots on the ground here. It seems like now they have learnt from that and wish to add more verticality to the gameplay. So with that said, I hope by watching this video you have come away learning more and what to expect from God of War Ragnarok, as sometimes it does take a second pair of eyes to catch on details you may in fact skip over. Now with that said, did you manage to pick up on something in the trailer that I missed out? If so, please do comment down below, as it would be useful for both myself as well as our fellow God of War enthusiasts. But until then guys, that has been it for this one. Whilst I haven't announced it, it should be pretty much known by now that I will be doing a history of on Kratos and his bloody journey through the Greek pantheon. So yes, you definitely want to keep an eye out for that, and you can do so by hitting the subscribe button and ticking that bell, as it will keep you up to date with all of my content. But until then guys, that has been it for me. So now as always, please comment, like, subscribe and share this video with everyone you know. Please take care, and I will see you all next time.